What's up guys, Jayztwocents here, and statistics have shown that the summertime, or leading right up to summer, usually is when people build their computers. It's when the most people are out there buying, looking for deals, because maybe it's graduation sales or something, I don't know. But we find that we like to try and head off some of the questions people have when building new computers, and today we're gonna tackle a topic we've not actually done on this channel before. I'm kind of curious to see how well received this is, as well as you guys' user feedback, and that is going to be gimmick versus feature. Take overclocking and reliability to the next level with the new Z390 Dark motherboard from EVGA. The Z390 Dark is built for extreme overclocking, utilizing features such as a 10-layer PCB, 17-phase power delivery, triple BIOS, and 150% more gold content mean you get more of what you need to build the ultimate Intel-based PC. To learn more about the Z390 Dark and its world-class features, visit evga.com. So we're gonna actually use some of our product here on the shelf to sort of talk about this, because here's what happens. Let's pretend we're at Fry's or we're at Micro Center. I mean, God knows we've got as much inventory as one of them. What tends to happen is someone goes, this looks like a neat board, and then they kind of look at it and then they start reading the box. You know why they read the box? Because they don't know what they're necessarily looking at or what the features are and stuff. And so this is where a lot of new people can certainly get in trouble. So what we're gonna do right here is we're just gonna grab 3 brands of motherboards to try to see kind of the different ways that these brands do their marketing. So we've got 3 of the big players here. We've got EVGA, ASUS, and MSI. Now EVGA, we're gonna go and start here because I am a huge fan of their packaging. They tend to be more minimalistic. As you can see, there's not a bunch of crazy logos everywhere. There's not a bunch of branding all over the place. It's not like busy, it's not ugly, if that makes sense. So what your eyes are immediately drawn to is just what's immediately like important. So there's some stuff missing from this box that we're gonna kind of talk about. And what I mean by missing is, in my opinion, what's missing are the gimmicks. They don't put in here gaming. They don't put in here VR ready. They don't even have RGB on these boards. I mean, technically the newer, I think this one might actually have RGB, but it's not controlled through like Mystic Light or any of that. They don't even have RGB headers on the board, so you can't expand it. So if you're not a fan of RGB and you're one of those that are in the camp like anti-RGB, I'm gonna stick it to them by not buying anything with RGB, this would be one of those boards. So if we move up to ASUS, it's very similar. You get a picture of the board. In fact, this box is kind of nice because it even opens up. There's no board in here, but it even opens up and you'd be able to see everything in there, although in the store it wouldn't open, hopefully. Got your basic branding on the bottom. These are actually required by Intel, if they're an Intel board, because it's kind of like Apple with their, Apple AirPods and iPod, was it iPad, iPod, iPhone ready or whatever, like the accessories. So because they are Intel branded, Intel, whatever, obviously they're in with chipset, that's it, yeah. They've got to put on here all these logos because that's part of the licensing since they are Intel product. But as you can see right here, it's very basic. It just kind of talks about, no, it does say gaming motherboard. I mean, it's there. It's teeny, but it's there. I mean, you could technically use this motherboard for anything besides gaming if you wanted to, but they're gonna call it gaming centric because it's got the lighting on here, it's got RGB, it's got a lot of functions gamers would want, like lots of fan headers, obviously the RGB expansion ports or headers on there. This particular motherboard actually has water block built into the VRM. But there's not really anything on here that would truly make it gaming. I mean, to be honest, it's got wireless, Bluetooth, LANs. I mean, there's nothing that makes it gaming. So that's kind of gimmick versus feature number 1. Anything that is branded gaming is 100% a gimmick. Now let's talk about MSI. I think they make great hardware, but I really think they need to work on their advertising / branding department, because they kind of double down on the gimmick marketing, in my opinion. So for instance, performance gaming. The reason why they have this one here is because it has a little knob you can turn that's supposed to automatically overclock. We'll talk about that in a minute here. Mystic Light RGB. We'll talk about RGB separately in a second here, but VR ready. This is the one we saw everywhere. In fact, Kyle even did an amazing little skit about VR ready tempered glass, which was freaking amazing. If you guys haven't seen it, you need to go and watch it. He does it as, I think that's one of the early Lyle character days. Look at the back of this. Oh my gosh. VR ready. As you see, this guy's got better compatibility for better performance on VR ready. Here's the problem with anything branded VR ready on a motherboard. The motherboard doesn't do shit in determining whether or not it's VR ready.
That's everything to do with the CPU and, more importantly, the GPU. The graphics card is the single most important piece in being VR ready. So something else that's a bit gimmicky that is going to up the price on something like this is we've got little nameplates here that you can change to put your own name on them. I guess it's personality, add personality to it. Mystic Light RGB, again, we'll talk about that in a second. Audio boost. What this is basically saying is that they've got an amplifier built into their headphone output. Because a lot of headphones, like studio grade headphones, require a lot of power to drive them because they're high ohms, high resistance. And so this is just saying it's got better output for the amount of power and the amount of headphone that it can drive with the factory, or the motherboard. But most people who are serious about sound anyway don't use onboard, they'll use a DAC or something like that. What is this, Lightning USB? Okay, that's fine, Lightning USB is all right. System saver. So it says 3 easy to use options and boot system successfully again. So they've got some really bad English on the back. I wish they'd paid someone to actually make sure this was all grammatically correct. The irony of me saying that, but I digress. Basically, it just means it has double BIOS. So if you accidentally flash a BIOS incorrectly or it shuts off during updating BIOS, you can get it back.
You forgot about WT Fast.
Oh yeah, right there. What the fast?
And Tri-Def VR.
Tri-Def VR. It's Windows compatible. That's a good one. And it's gaming certified. It's right there. Gaming certified. So the next thing we're gonna talk about here is RGB. Now I'm gonna be one of those people that subscribe to the unpopular opinion that RGB is not a bad thing. What sucks about RGB is the marketing behind it. There's been such a ridiculous push about RGB that what was an amazing feature because of choice has been soured by the amount of just stupid marketing behind it. Everyone's sick of the RGB rainbow puke that at the shows like Computex and CES, and everything's just freaking disco dancing and going crazy. But let's be honest, that is the right way to advertise what RGB is. That's clearly not a mode you need to leave it on. It's nice because RGB is not, in my opinion, a gimmick because of the fact that you can personalize it and make it what you want. Because back in the day, you could get white, green, red, or blue. If you decided later you want to go from red to green, guess what? You're buying all new fans, you're buying all new lights, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. So being able to do that when you want is a nice feature. What you guys are confused on being mad about is the marketing behind it. And I agree, hate the marketing because it's terrible. So I mentioned earlier gaming. And the problem with the word gaming is that the word itself is a bit of a gimmick. Because what we have right here are 4 examples of graphics cards, where one is labeled gaming and one is not, and it's its competitor. For instance, we've got the MSI Gaming X right here, which has gaming in the name. It's a 1650, which is slower than the Radeon RX 570 down here, which doesn't actually have gaming in the name anywhere. Another example here where we have the Strix Gaming Vega 64 versus the Founders Edition 1080 Ti, which doesn't say gaming anywhere on it, and the 1080 Ti is faster. And it's one of those things where if you were to and they're very similarly price matched too on these graphics cards. So if you were a new buyer and you're building for the first time and you're standing there looking at these boxes, you might be led to go, well, I want to build a gaming computer, so I want the gaming one. And that's where the packaging itself and the naming of some of this stuff can completely confuse and disorient and also mislead the buyer into thinking they're getting something better simply because it says the word gaming on it. So why do they say gaming? Typically, we're talking about AIB cards, which are add-in boards, which means these are third-party manufacturers for the main designer of the graphics card. So in this case, we've got an NVIDIA Founders Edition 1080 Ti and 2 custom options here available, one from MSI, one from EVGA. So what's changed is where all of these GPU cores used to go to the manufacturers to put into their graphics cards, where they would then bin them and come up with their tiered system of graphics cards. So for instance, both of these brands have a expensive model, like a medium model, and a more entry-level model where some of the feature sets between the cards change. They were all binned, which meant the higher, more expensive cards would perform better and potentially overclock better than any of the lower priced cards. That all changed when NVIDIA entered the space because NVIDIA obviously kept all the best GPUs for themselves. Why wouldn't you? They designed it, they're manufacturing it. Of course, they want to be the best because it's their name on it, so they keep the best, which means the binning that the AIBs receive now is a lot less gapped, if that makes sense. They're much more similarly spec'd now in terms of what their max frequencies and crash rates and stuff were versus what NVIDIA kept. So what happens now is you've got a standard Founders Edition card right here, complete with blower, cooler, and all of that, which in almost every single case performed better when overclocked than even their overclocking counterparts from the AIBs. And that's no fault of theirs, that's simply because of the way business is being done now with NVIDIA. But what you're gonna find here is a lot of even the overclocked versions, and this is where I'm kind of moving on to gimmick versus function. Yes, it is functional. It is indeed 20 to 50 megahertz faster than the base model. But ever since GPU Boost was introduced as well, they tend to go farther than those numbers anyway. And what you find is when you start manually overclocking these graphics cards, they are within 1 to 2% of each other from max clock, because you kind of find a more consistent crash rate where they all tend to sort of crash right around the same frequency, plus or minus like maybe 20, 25 megahertz, to where the difference in performance between them is not noticeable. But what you do get with the AIBs though, is obviously very robust coolers versus this. The Founders Edition card, at least back when we had a single fan, now they have dual fans, were significantly louder and hotter than these cards, where although these cards may not have performed necessarily any better than this, when it comes to performance of FPS, what they performed better at was acoustics and thermals. So what you found is that there was still a lot of value to have to these cards, even though they were a little bit more expensive than one that could potentially overclock farther. In just about every instance, like I said though, the Founders Edition cards that we received had the best overclocks than even the cards built for them. And there's that RGB again. But that brings us to our next kind of topic here, which is gaming mice. In my opinion, what's more important than the level of DPI, which is 16,000 versus 8,200, so that should mean this one's twice as better as this one, right? Twice as good. I mean, that's not the way that this works. In my opinion, what you should truly care about is the weight of the mouse, the type of grip it is it a claw, is it a palm? These are magnetic, they come off. You can add weights, which I've added them in there like a heavy mouse. You can use this tool to sort of change the height of the pad in the back. Plus it's ambidextrous. Like I said, it's got the same buttons on either side. So these are neat features that are not gimmicky in my opinion. But what is gimmicky is like a lot of the stuff they put on the box, right? This has a 16,000 DPI sensor, whereas this has an 8200 with a 150 IPS or inch per second. Do you know how fast you'd have to be moving this mouse to cover 150 inches per second? You'd be gaming like this. One of my favorite mices that I've ever had in the past was just the basic Microsoft 3-button laser mouse. That's it. I Counter-Striked day in and day out with that mouse. Then the Logitech came out with their optical mouse, which had that kind of a crazy like dimpled looking design on it. And the 518, I went through like 3 of them. What only differentiates a basic office mouse from a gaming mouse is a gaming mouse actually has a crisper optic in it, or sensor or laser, that gives you a little bit of fine control. So the last topic I want to talk about here is gaming chairs. You know what these companies have done? And the reason why there's so many of them popping up, they're all made in China. They're all made by the same manufacturer with just different stitching of name on there. They took cheap, cheesy racing chairs like you would find at like Pep Boys and threw it on a base of like any regular office chair and called it a gaming chair. Sitting in an office chair, like a true office chair, like a Herman Miller or even the Autonomous, which I personally sit in at both home and here at the studio, which is only $300. I say only, that's very cheap compared to like the price of like a Herman Miller or something like that. The way chairs are rated is in a 24-hour rating, and you have your 24-hour chair, you have an 8-hour chair, 4-hour chair, 6. I mean, the hour rating is where it's basically considered ergonomic and comfortable and good for your posture at that time rating. And if you guys have never researched that, go and look at it. It's actually a lot of science behind chairs and their design. There's no science and no design behind a gaming chair whatsoever. And they've even gone as far now to start putting RGB in gaming racing chairs. That is probably the most triggering thing I've ever seen, is like these gaming chairs. And I've sat in a few of them. I have some. I still have one sitting up there. No one sits in it at this studio. Even when guests come over, they'd rather sit in our IKEA little metal framed, no pad chair than that, because they sit in it and they're like, this kind of sucks. And I'm sure plenty of you are sitting in your racing chair right now watching this video going, hey, I like my chair. You know what? It's your butt. You put it wherever you want at the end of the day. But I find racing chairs to be extremely gimmicky. And that's why I'm only putting this out there, because if you're shopping for a setup and you're putting a new office together, or a man cave or a gaming room or whatever, you owe it to yourself to at least go and sit in some proper ergonomic chairs. Because trust me when I say, your butt and your back are gonna thank you at the end of the day. So anyway, that's just I've been wanting to make this video for a while, and because it's gonna spark discussion, it's gonna spark arguments too, but it's gonna spark discussion, and I'm really curious as to what you guys think as the consumer on what the true gimmicks versus features are. Every single gimmick is pretty much based off of a functional feature, but features can also be gimmicky too. So guys, tell me what you think down in the comments below, or head on over to Twitter at Jayztwocents and let me know what you guys think is a gimmick and what's an actual function you can't live without. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. I really hope I didn't break this mouse. I really like this mouse.